Cartoon Network, despite its extremely turbulent history, has been home to many of animation's most innovative gems. From the extremely creative anime-inspired energy of Dexter's Laboratory, to the more dramatic horror-heavy lean in Courage the Cowardly Dog, and even some more modern hits like a regular show essentially bringing stoner comedy to kids, and all the strides Steven Universe made for inclusivity in the medium. There's certainly been some big bumps in the road, but in many ways, Western animation would not be even remotely the same without their studio's history of talent and commitment. However, as groundbreaking Infinity Train, OKKO, and the like have been to the field, there's also a wholesome, lighthearted side that doesn't seem to get the same love. Of course, this isn't entirely true. Craig of the Creek eventually managed to get the following it wholly deserved, but you will barely hear anyone talking about the Fungies or Tig and Seek. There are other reasons for this being the case, but the point is there's a good number of gems from the late 2010s and early 2020s that got slept on big time, and probably the most overlooked of these is Summer Camp Island. Let's get started by covering the series' creator, British artist Julia Pott. Her bread and butter has mainly been independent works scattered online, particularly of the deep and thoughtful variety. The first of these to be public was her Kingston graduation film, 2007's My First Crush.
And I'd have to remember everything that he'd said to me, and everything I'd said to him, and how many times he kissed me, and where he touched me.
She then followed this up with several more works of similar caliber, such as The Event and Belly.
On the day before the first day, we fell into geometry like children. We slept, alone and restlessly, through the shipping muse.
Yes, this is the content we need to show our children. But after moving stateside, Pott, unsure of where to go from there, was convinced by a friend to try pitching a show of her own to a network, describing the experience as a bunch of short films in succession with the same cast of characters. The original pitch Bible, which Julia has graciously described in detail on her personal Substack blog, had a bunch of the basic ideas nailed from the beginning, including some of the characters' personalities like Oscar, but all revolving around a very different setup, taking place instead on a town in Maine called Summer Camp, where all its parents have disappeared for, of all things, a Cher concert, freeing the land to just get up and walk away to become a private, parent-free island, awakening with it some strange supernatural sensations hidden from the normal world. Right from the start, Pott made sure to build the idea she had in mind off how children's media would often colorfully portray taboo topics, and the three main characters, Oscar, Hedgehog, and Susie, were, in her words, directly based on aspects of her own psyche, the others also driven off experiences she personally knew. Although the designs originally stayed a hell of a lot closer to her YouTube shorts. Imagine seeing this next to Gumball. After 3 months, this 41-page Bible was all ready to go, and, as is standard, pitched around whatever studios she could find. But the one place that stood out in her head above all the others was, you guessed it, Cartoon Network. And sure enough, they were the ones who signed her idea on for development. The resulting series pilot took a full year to be produced, and then another year was spent developing and refining the ideas, characters, and various episode concepts, including 3 full storyboards, along the way changing the town idea to the actual summer camp that's in the final show. Seriously, do check out her Substack, not just to see the full details of this process, but also really get a handle on the media she was inspired by, as well as a bunch of other little works of hers. But after all that was said and done, the finalized pilot made its grand premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2016. And it must have been a big success there, as CN greenlit the concept to a full series in January 2017. During that 2-year development period, however, Julia picked up some studio experience by working on Adventure Time, most notably helping with the story of the Elements miniseries. It was these connections, and the show being picked up right around the time the AT team wrapped up their work, that got a lot of people from that show carried over to her show, which even Pot admits was hugely lucky of her. Unlike those other two shows I mentioned, SCI did begin life well before HBO Max ever entered the picture, and ran its full first season on Cartoon Network proper, albeit in one of the weirdest manners I've seen. See, the entire first half of the season, 20 episodes worth, aired on a single marathon weekend in July 2018, because this was when the network was trying desperately to keep up with the streaming age. And then the second 20 was dispersed across 4 weeks the next year. And I sure don't recall it getting much in the way of reruns, so in hindsight, it's little wonder why this didn't seem to catch on all that much. But enough about all that for now. Most of you are probably turning on this video asking, what exactly did go on in this show? How did something like this sustain 6 seasons when so many others got stuck with 4, 3, or even 2? What was I missing out on all these years? Well, these are all questions I am aiming to answer as I give this gem the retrospective I think it deserves. The premise of the series is pretty straightforward on the surface. It takes place in this remote summer camp that, unknown to the outside world, is full of magic. The counselors are real witches, it's inhabited by all these mythical creatures, and nearly every object is sentient.
Ow!
In all this, we follow 2 campers in particular, this elephant kid named Oscar, and her hedgehog best friend named Hedgehog, as they explore all over the island, have adventures with their campmates, and slowly discover that there may be more than meets the eye. But most of what they get up to involves confronting the head counselor and self-centered bitch, Susie.
I think you'll find that I just cleaned it. Mom.
What did you just call me?
Right off the bat, the fact that this shares a lot of the key staff from Adventure Time should give you a good general idea on what to expect from the writing here. It's for the most part really chill and low-key, with the constant surrealness only adding charm to the world they've created, thanks to how casually it's portrayed. It's the type of fantasy that doesn't expect you to think all that hard about the setting and the implications behind its rules, and just kinda go along with the flow alongside the characters. It's a fine line to ride that I think the show succeeds greatly at.
How do I check my voice? Excuse me. I love Mom. Watch me, Hedgehog. I love Mom.
It's very easy to dismiss this show as a it's funny because it's random sort of cartoon, which I imagine turned away many who are not into that. But I really don't think that's a fair assessment once you look at what actually goes into the series' world building and humor. Yes, it does get a lot of comedic mileage out of the surrealness, as I'll detail in a bit, but most of what they establish about the world functions as its own bizarre logic that it consistently follows. And when it is played for laughs, it's usually in regard to how the character reacts to it, either through encounters in the moment, or just treating them like a casual everyday sight.
So then I said, ball's in your court, Jeremy.
Good one.
In reality, a great portion of the humor comes from just witty character dialogue, and even most of that is so inherently baked into the personalities themselves that it comes quite naturally and never feels try-hard.
This is your project? Banana question mark?
Yeah, and get this. It totally is.
This vibe is greatly enhanced by how it's visually and audibly brought to life. The look of the characters can admittedly be an acquired taste for some, especially with the bulgy eyes, simple shapes, and even some animal features looking a little artistic licensed. But I was able to get used to it after seeing them in motion for a little while, and I enjoy how down-to-earth everyone moves despite the magical setting. It adds a lot to the aforementioned contrast.
Yeah, like even though they're like animals and there's magic, I want it to be like everyone feels really real.
What really brings it home to me, though, are the backgrounds and color work. There's a consistently soft palette, heavy on the pinks and light blues and browns, along with a lot of immersive yet cozily simplistic detail in the environments, giving the show a distinct storybook feel, which I could tell Pot was going for just from going off the stuff she draws in her free time. It helps that the background music mostly consists of ambient tracks that only further add to the warm and fuzzy feel of it all, while still willing to mix things up whenever the current situation calls for it.
But only I would follow you to other dimensions.
And, much like Adventure Time, it's frequently willing to let the music take a break and let the characters breathe, making it seem all the more personable.
I'm sorry about your nose.
Nah, it's starting to grow on me. I'm thinking maybe I'll keep it.
No, your first nose was cuter.
There's even some subtle touches they pull outside the actual episodes. There's actually 2 different vocal tracks used alternatively for the opening.
Magic is real here, far away from home.
Magic is real here, far away from home.
And for the closing, there's a nice bouncy track for the lighthearted romps, while any that hint at something greater get something more dramatic and mysterious. Always a fan of window dressing like that. The fact virtually everything is alive on the island is another memorable constant of the series. Even when they aren't doing anything, you still always see stuff like clouds and walls have faces in the background, which is some impressive, if kinda unsettling, attention to detail. But when we do see them in action, sometimes their presence is a simple Flintstone-style joke.
You're sleeping through me. You're sleeping through me.
Huh?
Other times they're full-on characters that actively drive entire plots. Like, you have this basketball who allows Oscar to become a sports star, only to desperately cling onto his companionship right into stalker territory.
Maybe you don't want to be best friends with basketball. And maybe basketball don't want to go to the hoop anymore.
No, please!
The freaking Moon, who by the way is voiced by Cedric the Entertainer, gets some good sass in every now and then.
It's almost bedtime. For you, I mean. For me, it's Monday morning.
You have the fabled monster under the bed, which we find out in one episode there's this whole society of them that treats Hedgehog like a goddess or something.
It's her grossest, most personal work since the snotty tissues. No. I'm going to auction it tonight at Hedgehogaby's.
Yeah, we'll talk about the stories a little later. And of course, there's Oscar's own set of pajamas, who is super precious and must be protected at all costs.
Can you do a spell on me? So my heart turns to ice and Oscar becomes like a stranger to me, so I don't miss him when he leaves me alone.
It's actually kinda insane just how committed they became to making a personality out of any single object they can think of, no matter how big or small their role is.
Brush, brush, brush your upper molars. Brush, 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 that's where you got that cavity.
But getting into the characters, Oscar and Hedgehog are just the right leads. 2 very different kinds of audience vessels to guide us through all the different antics that go on. Oscar is a very sensitive and kind-hearted sort, but not particularly creative nor confident, to the point where he's very dependent on Hedgehog to really get by. A lot of the conflicts are either kickstarted or escalated by him in some form.
Please be really careful with my sandwich on the table there.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
I wouldn't call him absent-minded, at least not in the sense many would define that, but he does tend to be forgettable and not have much in the realm of social skills.
I do better in small groups of 2 or less.
He always means well and wants to act in the best interest of everyone around him, even when he acts irrationally in the process.
How long do you plan on doing this?
For the rest of the night, for the rest of my life!
I lose!
Just seems so happy.
I'm so happy!
He really is a naive kid at the end of the day, and everything he goes through is ultimately meant to slowly better him as a person. Hedgehog, by contrast, is the much more active player of the 2, especially in mind. She's really curious, has a strong background in science, and a particular interest in learning magic, so naturally, she's going to be the main story vessel.
Ooh, a map of the island from 1895.
And I like that she is able to do so while still clearly having that childhood innocence to her, having fun with her campmates, gaining a little crush in the process.
Pointy ears, he's a bat. Backwards cap, these are facts. My heart is full to the max.
And of course, firmly standing by Oscar every step she can. And despite her also being rather cheery most of the time, she is able to show much more attitude than one would think, often either directly calling out Susie, or just letting out her repressed feelings in interesting ways.
Crab bucket! Crab bucket!
What's interesting is exactly how their dynamic changed in development. In the pilot, Oscar pretty clearly had a crush on Hedgehog.
You love Hedgehog. Everybody knows it's true. Whenever she's around, your heart starts to pound. What are you gonna do?
But not long after, the team and Pot realized that the way they support and complement each other hits much harder as a platonic relationship, taking inspiration from children's books like Frog and Toad and George and Martha. This is a move that I so greatly respect, because not only is it surprisingly rare to see such a strong non-romantic bond be depicted like this, but it makes the way they bounce off each other feel that much more genuine and close to reality. Very often, Oscar will say things about Hedgehog that, in any other show, would very much come across as romantic crushing.
I'll help you clean your room, Oscar. Oh, thank gosh, you're my best friend. I could search for 1,000 years and never find another person like you.
And if he was crushing, his actions would frankly start to look very creepy on his end.
Yeah, I always follow Hedgehog. How do you think I get to breakfast every Oh my gosh!
But as is, he just constantly wants his best friend by his side so they can bring out the best in each other. And I think many of us feel close to one particular person like this. Of course, Susie is the one character everyone who's even vaguely familiar with the show will remember, which makes sense. She easily carries the biggest presence every time she appears.
Don't come crying to me with your dumb baby problems, because I am not your mum. I'm the prettiest girl that ever talked to you.
She's rude, she's self-centered, she's gross sometimes. She's a cold soul who takes pride in getting to call the shots and keep the babies in their place.
I'll be up for another hour because I'm the camp counselor, but you have to go to bed now because you're babies.
But despite how she's the type of counselor that you never want to have in real life, there's such a charisma to how she's written and performed that always makes her constantly enjoyable to watch. Every other line she says is so quotable.
Oh, Pepper, did your mummy tell you you were good at that?
Yeah?
Every mother lies. What's going on out there? Well, Too slow, I lost interest.
And I think a lot of that comes from how she's voiced by Julia Pott herself. I always think creators voicing main characters in their work just always has a sort of special authenticity to it. And that very much applies with Susie. I can't imagine anyone playing this part except Pot.
I play her, and it's very cathartic. Yeah, I get to be as mean as I like. Writing for her is really fun. You get to say all the things that you've sort of always wanted to say, but never
would.
Yeah, never would.
The show also has a habit of throwing guest voices in places that feel so random and unexpected at the moment, but they end up adding so much to the character they're voicing. Like the first episode alone has Richard Kind as this therapeutic pool shark, and his articulate, upbeat way of speaking is able to balance the calming yet still comedic tone of his quite well.
I think what you're experiencing is newness, not the strangeness of the world. You'd feel this way anywhere you went.
You also have Whoopi Goldberg as this head elf named Barb, who always likes to take her own approach to life and will show sass when argued with. This too proves a perfect fit.
Oscar, could you come down here for a minute? Oh, sorry, you had a mosquito on your face.
Then there's this Yeti that the kids befriend named Saxophone, and though he usually only speaks in like an instrument voice, when they can understand him, he's freaking Elijah Wood.
I'm a teen Yeti, and I have different views than my family. They just spend all day rolling around in laundry.
There are many other characters across the show worth mentioning, of course, like the other witches Betsy and Alice, Puddles and the Alien King, the Ghost Boy, Ava, Howard, the other monsters, the campmates like Max, Lucy, and Pepper. But if I went in full depth with the whole cast, we'd be here all day and this video would never get finished. So let's move on to actually covering what kind of stories we get here. So, being such a relaxed series, most of the episodes in Season 1 feel very flavor of the week. You have a talent show episode, a video game brought to life episode, a time travel episode, a convention episode, a mommy problems episode, a trade mania episode, a freaking high school prom episode. They did basically everything you can think of. The series is constantly tossing new ideas at you with how assorted these episodes are, but it never feels overwhelming because they always spend just as much time on a particular setup as you'd want before they move on to something different. And thanks to the high episode count, it comes across more like they're taking as much advantage of the setting as they can. And no matter how archetypal some of these episodes can get, they're always executed in such a lighthearted, likable way thanks to the show's unique flavor and tone. You've heard these stories before, but you've never heard them told in this way, so you don't mind, really.
It's a token of thanks, for you truly know how to treat your guests like royalty.
But to those of you who beg to have lore in these shows, rest assured, this island has some of that too. But just hints of lore for now. This mostly occurs in episodes like Fuzzy Pink Time Babies, where Oscar and Hedgehog put themselves in frozen time so they can stay together when Hedgehog's father prepares to take her off the island for business class. Only to find this mysterious old, yet really kind witch named Ramona.
There you are! Big Baby will take you to the beach.
And we find out that she has some kind of relationship with Susie, and that they've both been working on Earth longer than they look.
How long has Susie been 15?
It's a mystery.
And there's a few more instances where they throw in some lore when you aren't expecting it. Like this episode where Oscar is recording a video about his time at camp for his parents. But the monsters, who run the island's postal service, refuse to send it because it's the only remaining place in the world with magic, and therefore shouldn't be exposed.
If any adults find out we're here...
You'd be in danger?
Yeah, the whole island would be in danger.
I had no idea.
Then you have the episodes that simply prove impressively high concept. One of the most memorable to me is one where Hedgehog, at a full moon festival, gets turned into a werewolf, or werehog. And in this feral form, she's wreaking havoc all over the camp, so naturally everyone gets scared of her, and she and Oscar try to find some way to reverse this. Okay, pretty standard stuff so far. But then the moon takes them to the Werewolf's Moon Festival.
The real one. The witches way over-commercialized it.
Where they encounter the werewolf queen, who shows Hedgehog the benefits of her new form.
Being a werewolf increases your senses tenfold, letting you perceive lights and colors that you couldn't before.
She even gets some advice on how to help control some of her primal instincts. So by the end, she decides that instead of running away from it, she's gotta both control it and embrace it.
Looks like being a werewolf is just part of me now.
It's such a fascinating subversion for this kind of story, and turns what started as a standard monster tale into a pretty thought-provoking metaphor for puberty. I really do admire them for taking this direction, and this surprisingly enough sticks for the rest of the show.
Good night, werehog. Hello, Hedgehog.
There's another where everyone is making paintings that the full moon brings to life in a way that allows everyone to walk in and fully immerse in these worlds, Mario 64 style. Everyone else is making these really adventurous, unique paintings, while Oscar only makes a quiet little meadow with flowers and puppies that everyone thinks is boring.
Maybe I meant more things going on emotionally?
What do you mean? It's an emotional roller coaster!
Only to find the intents are completely tiring them out before long, which is when they come to appreciate the simpler, more peaceful stuff. It's honestly a solid metaphor just for the appeal of shows like this and other lighthearted stuff over your Infinity Trains and Steven universes.
Hey guys, check out my painting!
That's not real art. It's too cute. I'm here to see art that matters. Abstract, disorienting, depressing art. Art like Lucy's.
Those shows are much more ambitious for sure, and can really grip you in both dramatically and emotionally.
So many unresolved emotions.
But after a while, people will want to take it easy. And just because something isn't challenging the audience as much, doesn't mean it's of lesser value necessarily.
I guess it's more than that. It's so pure. But more importantly, it makes me feel good.
Poignant stuff indeed. Probably one of the most fascinating, though, is the episode Midnight Quittance. Oscar and Hedgehog are invited to Ramona's annual Feast for the Time God that allows all time to move forward as nature intended. Right off the bat, we get met with some fantastic, somewhat philosophical ideas when we get told about the Tome of Time, and exactly how Ramona functions in frozen time.
She's just in between the seconds of the clock.
But when the actual quittance happens, with Oscar being the screw-up he is, he ends up pissing off this all-powerful being, causing their entire lives to flash by in these super quick sporadic cuts, all while he's trying to figure out how he can fix the mess. The art direction and layout for this episode must have been absolutely insane with how they had to come up with a completely new image every 2 seconds or so.
Bingo! The Spanakopita!
It's, in my opinion, the perfect example on how such a seemingly simple show like this can become something more layered without at all compromising its identity. Of course, no matter how deep it gets, that doesn't overshadow how many of the other episodes are just really creative and funny. There's one where everyone on the island is having a costume party, and Alice, in a bit of short-sighted self-indulgence, casts a spell that turns everyone into their costumes, which leaves Hedgehog as the witch of the island, and Susie as a freaking cheerleader.
Give me an R! Give me an E! Give me a G! R-E-T!
There's that time they see Susie alone on her birthday, so they throw a party for her where they say the opposite of what they think, and after she finds out, she hears this savagery.
Your smile does not look like a haunted jack-o'-lantern face. I don't see a coat draped over a chair when I'm sleeping and think it's you watching me.
Or how about that time Hedgehog goes against Steve and Ruth in the library?
Card-carrying member of the Iron Bladder Society. I pride myself on going once a day at midnight.
I'll admit, when it comes to episodic shows like this, I tend to pick and choose which episodes to go through based on what premises sound the most interesting to me. But when I first watched this show, I found myself watching nearly every episode. That's how much it drew me in right out the gate. There are of course a few duds in there, but even those have enough interesting ideas and charm to them that I think they were at least worth watching once. Personally, if you'd like to get into the show and want to see the peak of what this special island has to offer, these are the episodes I would recommend. But as you know, this would only be the start of a summer to remember. So, now that the world's been established and we've officially moved on to the HBO Max original era, what exactly does Season 2 do to build up on all that was accomplished in the first one? Well, it's somewhat complicated. And full disclosure, this was by far the hardest season to write about for that reason. At first, Season 2 may seem like more of the same from Season 1, with many new imaginative ideas sprinkled in on top of the old ones, and there's definitely more of a determination to make these leave an impact than most of Season 1's entries. Like, to name one example, Hedgehog fakes a molar to save Oscar from humiliation, and this lands the two of them in a freaking underground mole court, and from there it gets as unhinged as you'd expect.
That's the smartest thing you've done since you made me that fake tooth this morning.
We fall down, but we get up.
The next episode after this is about them making a business out of tortilla blankets that quickly spirals out of control for them.
Hey, lazy kids! Where's our towels?
Yeah, there's a handful of stories that get more insane than before. On the other end of the spectrum, there's another episode full on tackling Oscar's relationship with his dad, showing they barely have any common ground and thus struggle to really talk to each other.
Why are dads so hard to talk to, Hedgehog?
Maybe we don't know them that well?
He's my dad. Of course I know him. He has a job, likes to read chapter books, and has to drink coffee every morning.
What else?
Only for a medieval adventure through Oscar's favorite book series Dungeon Dog to be more of a bonding experience than they could have anticipated. This is a great one too, because the way they bounce off each other feels so true to distant child-parent relationships, particularly how it clearly portrays both of them meaning well. And this setting provides an effective lens that gives some excitement to balance out the quieter personal moments.
This reminds me of when you used to take me to the boats at the park.
And afterwards, you always wanted banana splits.
Yeah, because the boats were yellow like bananas.
This show really does know how to play with tone. But for the most part, there's actually a lot more going on despite the season being half the length of the first. And it's not like there's a big tone shift or anything, thank God, but there's definitely a more forward-thinking mentality going on. Notably, how it moves forward with the established arcs. And this is where I'm going to mention some plot threads and characters that I didn't have the time to address in Season 1. See, there's this recurring thing where Hedgehog was secretly taking magic lessons from Betsy, and even earns a wand in one of the final episodes. But upon finding this out, Susie angrily confiscates it from her, which by the way is the note the season ended on. The first episode of this season directly follows up on this, with Susie insisting to the Island Council that Hedgehog shouldn't be trusted with such raw power, particularly citing this one loose cannon from her past named Mildred. Remember that name, but Ramona ultimately pushes Susie to give Hedgehog lessons herself, much to both of their reluctance. Fuck! This is the focus of a few more episodes after, one of which Susie very clearly tries to distract from the lessons as long as possible through manual labor.
I did everything you asked. Can we start?
And another where Hedgehog is pushed to her limits when trying to have a coven sleepover at the witch's old school. This is a really nice change of pace for both characters, as it allows us to start seeing a vulnerable side to Susie, which, as we'll see as we go along this retrospective, becomes quite the defining aspect of her.
Ugh. Honesto, encouragement-o.
And it also gives Hedgehog a very consistent challenge that works well with some of the difficulties he's faced back in Season 1. She's already had a distinct bone to pick with Susie and her attitude, and now that she's familiar with how the island operates and even a lot of its history, it makes perfect sense to slowly plunge her toward the center of the action and out of her comfort zone, all while still allowing her to be the sensible and sharp-minded one. But to name some other arcs going on, one of the campmates, Lucy, has a distinct kinship going on with the Yetis and is even able to speak their native tongue. And she even gets a spotlight episode where we see a little club of hers that's helping relieve her homesickness.
I'm homesick.
Oh! There's also some follow-up on the aftermath of Hedgehog's confession to Max.
Everyone's asking me if it's weird between us since I told you I liked you. But it hasn't been weird. I'm so glad we're pals. Me too.
We visit the alien planet again and witness their king finally marrying Puddle. Constellation signs be damned.
Blah, married.
I'd be crying, but I used up all my tears.
Side note, why is it that in the worldwide discussion of LGBTQ rep and animation, these two never get acknowledged? They're freaking adorable!
On this planet, we're always married. And as long as we're walking on these pebbles, we're on this planet. He must be new. What? Nothing.
We see that Susie and Ramona have had quite a bit of a falling out as the years went by. We did get strong hints of this in Season 1, but here it's made quite clear to us that Susie has some active disdain for her frozen companion. I also want to quickly mention Jim Jams here.
Here she is. Brood, I'll be in the kitchen.
Man, he really needs out of this abusive relationship. The whole Betsy and Hedgehog are werewolves thing is front and center in another story where Susie, unaware of her companion's identity, decides to sneak into their rituals and ultimately learns to put her biases aside.
Whatever you want, Wolfie. Let's dye our butts.
Actually, I'm gonna keep perfecting hearts. You dye your butt.
I like putting dye on my butt.
And even many of the episodic self-contained adventures are directly following up on previously established concepts or settings. We finally see the inner workings of the United Monster Postal Service. Hedgehog's science podcast is the center of an adorable as hell pajama story.
Before washing, it's best to zip up to avoid snags.
So, washing is gossiping, and I should zip it? That's great advice! Thanks, pajamas!
And that father-son bonding app I mentioned earlier makes a point to use the immersive library books to seamlessly kickstart the plot. In a lesser show, so many of these would pretty much be one and done, maybe a little callback here and there. But instead, they know they can be used to tell more than one interesting story, and so despite it still being fairly episodic at the end of the day, there's still a sense of progression going on. It adds layers and gives us more reason to care about the goings-on on the island and everyone within it. Case in point, I want to give special attention to the final episode of Season 2, where Oscar starts to feel unimportant because he doesn't have any magical abilities like his companion, and has been put down by parental figures since childhood. But through a talk with Dr. Shark, he discovers he's in fact a glowworm, radiating positive energy to those around him.
That's what glowworms do in the magical world. They bring magic where there isn't any. In fact, no one can do magic without people like you.
Wow. It puts his role in the show in a better perspective other than just as the naive screw-up going on wacky adventures, and gives us more motivation to follow what even he's up to. Everyone really has something going on here. I think the artistry reaches a higher standard here as well, with more varied and immersive backdrops in particular. There's the sense that, now that the artists had the time to get acquainted with the world and characters, more of their energy could be spent adding more detail into everything. And sure enough, this will only get better and better with each passing season. Though I will say, and I don't know if this is a storyboard artist thing or what, but there are episodes where the character models start to look real distorted. Hedgehog, what is going on with your body? Overall, yeah, Season 2 is about the natural evolution you'd expect given all that's been established. By now, 60 episodes in, we've explored pretty much everything this fantasy setting has to offer. The characters' individual roles are now firmly set, and the art department seems to have found their full footing on how to bring everything envisioned beautifully to life. So, where do they go from here? Well, as you'll see next time, the answer might surprise you. But believe me when I say, we have not yet reached the peak of the mountain, and it's only going to get more all out from here. So by this point, you've probably come to expect a certain rhythm with how this series goes about its story, structure, world building, and all that. But then comes Season 3 to throw quite a massive curveball. By production of this, I suppose the team knew SCI was going to be hosted on HBO Max, because instead of just giving us more of the same again, they decided to make this batch consist of 3 multi-episode arcs. At the time, it was not unheard of for Cartoon Network shows to do this, with Adventure Time, Steven Universe, and Teen Titans Go of all shows repeatedly getting this treatment. But something about the way these storylines were designed very much give off the impression that watching through these all the way through on a streaming service was the only true way to experience these stories. And with how much each of these 3 have to break down, I think it makes the most sense to cover each one individually, starting with... Man, first attempt at a longer story and they're already giving us something huge. After so much teasing and so many hints, we finally get the full backstory on the relationship between Susie and Ramona. We get big lore dumps that take all we currently know about the magic in this world into its proper context, and we get what exactly is up with the whole summer camp setup in the first place. To start with, we learn that witches once ran this whole business that helped power cities around the world, only for it to be taken over by the Industrial Revolution.
What's better than a teenage witch?
Apparently, something called a hydraulic crane.
This then indirectly causes all the magic to start disappearing all over the planet, which also leads to everyone forgetting entirely about the existence of witches.
So the only thing that you've forgotten is that you're a witch?
Like a sandwich?
Susie quickly tries to get everyone to flee to a new haven, but minutes later, it seems to be too late for her.
Where is everyone? This can't be happening.
But just as she runs dry of energy, she is brought on board thanks to a much younger Ramona.
There's barely any magic left in you. I think making this boat taps you out.
Holy shit, it's Hilda! But as expected, they come across the island where they immediately meet the elves.
I'm Barb, the groundskeeper of this island, and I haven't even figured that out.
And these 8 sucking Jabberwocks.
Moisturizer, please!
And then they find out about this prophecy where 2 best friends must save the world's magic, and we time skip to where they are about to finish forming the coven, which is also when we see Betsy and Alice first bond on screen. Yeah, a lot of freaking stuff happens. So for most of the runtime, this does a dang great job at feeding you all the story while still getting us to really engage with these characters and wanting their efforts to succeed, even if we obviously know from the mere setup of the show how that's gonna end up. And there's still no shortage of whimsy and charm all throughout, which keeps everything as lighthearted and likable as we've all come to expect from this series by now. It keeps a solid pace all throughout, having all this action mixed with some slower moments that feel earned. But then the relationship starts to become downright heartbreaking, as it's revealed that Ramona must be kept in frozen time while the Coven restores the magic.
The one for whom time stands still must stay and live in the present. The one for whom time continues must live to stay present in frozen time.
Yeah, some of these plot points definitely feel a bit pulled out of thin air, but it does lead to a very emotional scene where everyone is saying goodbye to the old witch. Even though we haven't seen her and Susie bond for very long, just the lengths she'll go and the way they have been written together up until now really puts everything we've seen about this character in a whole new perspective.
We have to honor the prophecy.
But the prophecy said we were going to be two best friends who save magic together. If we can't even be together, then what's the point?
Susie, trust me. The binder will ring thrice again.
Doubly so with the final part, where Ramona is what gives Susie the idea to start opening up the island to new magical creatures scattered around, which the witches put under the guise of a summer camp. She does this under the impression it'll free Ramona from frozen time early, to the point where she literally breaks out in song.
'Cause Ramona is coming back today.
But it turns out to be one big lie that was made just to open up Susie to the idea in the first place.
Bringing the kids to the island was the only chance we had of saving magic. I hope someday you'll understand. Your BFF, Ramona.
Hence the bad blood we see in present day, and the overall bitterness he displays toward the campers.
Hey Susie, where's Ramona? Ramona who?
Just, man, what a tell-all, and a downright tragic one. I know me saying all this to you probably undersells the impact this leaves, and I really don't like spoiling all this, but this really was important to mention because not only is it the whole meat of this miniseries, but it's also crucial context to keep in mind from this point on in the retrospective. There's still a fair amount of mysteries to uncover, sure, but the general concept of the series and the context behind the fantasy elements are now fully visible, and the tone of the show going forward definitely reflects this. And even with how heavy it gets, it still manages to contain some great levity by working in some inherently fun ideas, like seeing these witches explore modern-day New York.
Good day, dear sirs.
Okay, they're buying it.
And as a tell-all game changer, man, this really was just so peak. 10 out of 10, must watch for anyone who's a fan of the series on some level. That said, there are still 2 miniseries left to cover this season, so as tempting as it is, let's not lose ourselves too much in the feels and see what the show intends to follow this up with. After that big drama bomb, it only made sense to follow it up with some of the most lovable, happy characters of the whole show. Unfortunately, there's not much of a structure going on here. There is, I guess, a narrative. The 2 lovebirds have a little vacation and leave Hedgehog in charge while they're gone. But it mostly seems to play out as a handful of vignettes as opposed to a story.
It's this dreadful ennui, this maleficent malaise, this vast and endless leisure.
The first episode just has her and Oscar survey all the swans on this planet, and Oscar scares away this one swan named Dennis.
Oh no, I'm not coming near you, little boy.
Okay. The second has them discover these little jester guys under the castle floorboards, and are used to piece together a mystery involving lost saltwater taffy, and the mystery gets resolved by the 2 suddenly coming back. Well, that sure didn't last very long. Also, the king played billiards. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
So technically, this wasn't a ghost story.
I think it still was.
And in the third, Susie comes in to pick up her campers, only to find that, in the aftermath of the trip, the king has gained a sudden, dangerous obsession with salt to the point where he nearly kills the balance of the sweet planet. So it's up to everyone else to figure out how to snap him out of it.
Yeah, baby. Give me that good salt.
Yeah, there's very little reason for this to even be a miniseries in the first place. You probably could have just made these 3 standalone episodes and it'd work about as well. To be fair, I liked a few scenes actually showing the couple's honeymoon, showing them experiencing different emotions they didn't know about before.
Ooh, hold on, let me write this down.
fury, resentment, tinge of annoyance, disappointment, neglect. But also, it's bananas attractive that you're so curious. It's a real smorgasbord.
That's a really fun idea. Too bad that ends just when it feels like it's getting started. The stories themselves are alright. The second is probably my favorite with the mere absurdity of the idea, along with us getting a better look at the alien castle. Third is definitely the most memorable for how insane it is though.
Salt makes everything taste great, and soon your entire planet will be mine.
But none of these are what I'd call top-notch stuff, nor would I even call these the aliens' best material for that matter. Still, it's not a bad watch all things considered. It's a fun diversion for about 33 minutes of your life, but it's by far the most underwhelming part of this entire season. Yeti Confetti is a nice middle ground between the two arcs we had before, and despite being the longest of them at 5 episodes, doesn't feel like it drags itself out.
This is so avant-garde.
This one also features some mini-stories to sort of justify the sectioning, but unlike the Alien one, which plays itself too loosely and felt a little short on time to build a solid framework, this one manages to successfully do that by having each story very cleverly tie into the greater thematic arc of Lucy trying to bond with her Yeti kin during the titular festival, which serves as a constant and effective framing device. It starts out with the Yetis trying to surprise Lucy by declaring her part Yeti, which is something Oscar and Hedgehog found out as part of Susie's backstory.
I don't know, she looks pretty regular. That's a Yeti.
What? It's kind of a weak misunderstanding plot, but it does pick up more as it goes along. We see Lucy showing off her knowledge by taking care of Yeti pups, or Yums as they're called, even in the face of a self-proclaimed Yum Whisperer.
Your pups? These aren't dogs, you know. You know, you're not such a bad apprentice when you put your mind to it.
I'll admit, he did kinda annoy me at first, but he does get better.
Or friends.
She also wants to participate in this ritual, singing the praises of this famous old Yeti named Bassoon. Don't worry, he's alive.
Why would we wait until he's gone to say nice things about him?
I don't know. I've never heard so much respect for a living person.
And then she is put through trial after trial to find her instrument, and by extension, her Yeti family. But alas, nothing comes of it other than despair and loneliness. Or does it? So I'll admit, I didn't really think much of Lucy as a character before this point. Apart from a few moments, I felt she was just kinda there. There's a reason I barely brought her up before.
This doesn't add up.
But I really came to like her here. Sure, there's not too much to her personality-wise, but you really do sympathize with her being such a studied expert on Yeti culture, only to have that be repeatedly challenged on how prepared she actually is to dive into it. It's such a struggle that I think proves surprisingly relatable, despite how much it's clearly littered in fantasy. Another thing they do a great job with is to get us invested in the culture itself, as we find out so much about how Yetis are born, grow up in their early years, find their place among the crowd, and of course, celebrate their heritage. Some of it is played for humor, sure, but there's always a logical real-life parallel going on.
We will be speaking honorific holiday Yeti. It's got completely different grammatical rules. Traditional Yeti would be really rude during Yeti Confetti.
These episodes are also just damn funny in places. I'd say some of the stronger comedy we've had in the show up to now. Susie, for instance, only appears briefly to talk about a prank war she got in with Bassoon, but it's such a great Susie moment.
He thought he got me so bad, but I love the smell of lavender. My place smelled great, and I smelled great.
We get a ton of especially fun Oscar moments.
I'm using each blink as a napping opportunity. I'll never be tired again.
But the best part, in my opinion, is what stopped the heart cloud in the final segment from snowing. The episode constantly frames it as Lucy's fault for not being full Yeti, when they decide to drop this amazing bit of continuity. Also, Keith David's in this.
I'm a witch. And a werewolf.
Werewolves are Yeti's oldest known predator. No wonder the cloud was scared. It was you!
Yeah, the writing staff have definitely found their full footing by this point. So while this is nothing particularly grand or heartbreaking like Susie and Ramona, there's just so much substance that I just have to recommend this one too. Just really solid all around. Alright, after all the development we just got, we're back to standard 11-minute romps. What are we starting with this time?
Magic is real here.
What is that?
So before I get to talking about anything else, you may be asking what the hell this incredibly trippy art style is all about. Well, this episode, titled Sea Bunnies, was written, directed, composed, and even animated by one Julian Glander. While it may be off-putting at first, you then remember it wasn't unheard of for Adventure Time to do guest animators in select episodes. And Julian not only did a little segment for Gumball before this, but he even did a few title cards for this series, so in that regard, it's a pretty endearing move.
Please don't slurp, please don't slurp.
Hey, yo!
And while this isn't exactly a style I'd want to see for a full series, it does have its own charm, and he did a solid job translating these sorts of designs over to 3D.
I know that facial expression. You're hungry. Here, have a sea cucumber.
That said, yeah, it's an unmistakable giveaway of how much DNA this show shares with AT, which is something this season makes obvious even beyond this example. The more it evolves, the more it chooses to go really experimental and out there with its episodes. And like that other show, the results are kinda mixed. Case in point, the very next episode decides to combine Oscar and Alice, which proves to be quite the unexpected fun dynamic.
Let's say we get out of here. Dancing banana sundaes on me.
Yep, I'm comfortable letting my guard down.
The actual episode is pretty typical, involving this mushroom gossip, but the novelty really helps it stand out.
Air into spaghetti. Pass it on. Mushrooms turn the hair into spaghetti.
There's also a nice little flashback story where a younger Hedgehog and Oscar join his dad on the camping trip, where the poor elephant kid is constantly treated like a sack of potatoes, the middleman in the boat who must stay in his place lest he risk putting everything off balance, which in typical Oscar fashion he does.
Nothing is happening.
So upon settling for the night, the kids are restless in fear over this fabled spirit known as the Jersey Devil, which by the way is indeed a part of real New Jersey folklore. Isn't that a fascinating base to drive a Cartoon Network story around? And these fears only seem to get confirmed when some sandwiches they leave mysteriously disappear in the night.
Did you guys eat our sandwiches to make it look like the Jersey Devil was here?
I should mention too that this episode is framed around wanting to preserve some pine barrens so the witches don't tear it up into a spot for themselves. A bit random, but definitely in character, and it does give us another smart Hedgehog moment, so it's all good. Probably my favorite, however, is one where the library door is broken, meaning everyone has to keep quiet until it's fixed. And unfortunately, that can only happen when Oscar retrieves a key ingredient across a bridge where a scary monster seems to be lurking.
Aha!
All this is accompanied with almost no background music, leaving only the natural sounds of the forest serving as the audio track. And anyone who knows me well enough knows that I eat this aesthetic heavy stuff up like nobody's business. No joke, when I first watched this, I really turned up the surround speakers because it is just that beautiful and immersive to me. But they aren't all winners. There's a flashback to Witch School focusing on Mallory and Emma, which sounds interesting on the surface, and we do get some neat lore out of it. But only hearing this alligator's voice for several minutes honestly grated on me fast.
So do you know what we're looking for? I'm happy to lead. Okay, I'm just spit.
Shut up! And then there's the episode centered on the bond between a snowflake and his high heel wearing mouse, and I'm sorry, why does this character look distractingly like Arthur? How am I supposed to take that design seriously? But with all this being said, what may seem like another string of random assorted stories actually has more consistency than you may think, because each and every one of these 13 episodes center around the general topic of fear. Some more overtly and spotlighted than others, but it's always there in some capacity. The first one is about fear of the unknown, the next one has Alice fearing the mushroom death cap, twice do superstitions come up, once with the classic phrase breaking the leg, where Oscar wants to live his dream of successfully preparing and serving breakfast, and again where Oscar appears to pass his bad luck to Hedgehog.
Pine cones hit the average person on the head 3 times a year.
In fact, come to think of it, a lot of the plots this season go to Oscar, which makes sense as, like I've said before, he's home to a lot of the personal stories. And as the introvert who has to come out of his shell over the course of his time at camp, yeah, that checks out even more perfectly. I've already mentioned his bridge monster, the bad luck superstition, and the Jersey Devil, but there's also situations like him screwing up ghost store manners thanks to his own anxiety and their rule going against his ever-polite habits.
Then you must improve your manners. Only then will I put your knuckle sandwich back in the fridge.
Dude, we're 8.
And also him finding this buried root outside Susie's yard that he raises like a child, which is weirdly a recurring thing for him in the show, by the way. And he becomes afraid to stand up to the root even when they're draining the energy of all his campmates.
My bottom is cold, but my top is hot.
Okay, maybe this one isn't all that grounded, but it still ties back to a relatable social problem.
Oscar!
One step closer, and I drain him dry.
But rest assured, there's still a few of these that go to other characters. One of Hedgehog's has her becoming paranoid about potential bad futures seemingly caused by the most innocuous of ripple effects.
Wow, is he chewing gum in school? My gosh, high school Oscar is a ne'er-do-well.
This is a pretty common type of story for any setting that has magic in it. In fact, the show kinda dabbled in that idea before, and the other show I did a big review on does exactly that as well. And much like the Dead End example, I like that they gave Hedgehog a mature moral here.
When I get stressed about the future, I come down here.
So I didn't mess anything up?
Not the future, at least. Maybe messed yourself up worrying so much over it.
It is kinda weakened by the realization that the Pharaoh's seeds he uses only lists hypotheticals, but all the same, the idea does stick in one's head after.
Have a seat.
I call the coroner!
Another equally deep story of hers is when she needs to be paired with her broom and must explore her family tree to figure out where her witch genes came from.
Do you want to know how I lost me eye?
So not only does she meet all her grandmas, but it also turns into a good old generational trauma story.
Why do you sit like that?
If I fly sitting up, everyone will see me and I'll be a sitting duck for witch hunters.
But really, she doesn't get all that much else this season. With a few exceptions, she's mainly bouncing off Oscar. Which I mean, yeah, it is a core part of her character and their interactions shine just as much as ever, but it also kinda illustrates how front-loaded most of her development actually is, which may not bother you on first viewing, but it does become noticeable when you think about the show as much as I have. But the most atmospheric, memorable episode of the whole season, and might I remind you, this season gave us freaking sea bunnies, is the one they chose to end on. And of all characters, it stars Pepper, traversing through a thick fog only to get lost in the thick, spooky woods, encountering bizarre characters as he tries to find his way to Susie's place. I've mentioned before how the general style of the show is like a children's storybook, and no episode brings that vision to life any more effectively than this one. The general structure, the sense of imagination, the types of creatures we see, even the sound design really takes you into the journey. Very akin to Over the Garden Wall now that I think about it. Also, Keith David's in this. Huh, deja vu.
Can you see Susie's house?
I can see her chimney.
So yeah, Season 4 probably is the single best illustration of just what Summer Camp Island has evolved to. Where what may seem like some levity after all the world building and character development contains just as many layers of depth and thought-provoking themes as ever. All while still being a lighthearted, entertaining cartoon at the end of the day. While there are a few episodes that feel like the type of Adventure Time joint I'd skip, I'd say SCI has generally had a better idea on where its deeper messages and stories should be placed, without heavily intruding on the main cast and appeal that attracted its audience in the first place. But with all that said, this is the last season to have fully standalone episodes, as the storytelling of this show is soon gonna kick straight into high gear. And now with Season 5, we return to multi-episode arcs, this time more evenly distributed with 5 packs of 3. But don't let the higher quantity make you think these are any less lore-heavy than what we had in Season 3. If anything, it all kicks into an even higher gear than before. But no special intros this time. Curses. I'll also say up front, these mini-stories have a lot more tying them together than Season 3 did, which I believe only did so with the Yeti thing. It's not 100% consistent or even really integral here, these all still more than stand on their own. But as we go through these, you'll notice how they subtly reference each other. Also, most of these take us back to the very different periods in the history of the show's world, allowing us to get more of a look at eras that have been hinted at but never outwardly seen. Case in point, the first of these brings us to this very untamed, very young, very pink and purple prehistoric world, and only a couple days into its life, a flower sprouts where none other than Barb is born. And despite being 60 years old in appearance, he doesn't quite have any idea on what anything else is, or what kind of roles he's meant to play in this world, so she kinda makes everything up as she goes. These bratty plants here try to get her to drive away the spotted bears bothering them.
You! Sir! Tell me what the problem is. Bears are eating us, sir!
Which he manages to do, only for the problem to become worse. So she gets exiled onto the top of the mountain, where she meets Ulf, the one lonely fern, and in this moment of literal reflection, Barb decides to take up inventing concepts like sleeping, skills, and talking in the third person. Mostly done through acronyms that would make the kids next door proud.
Sound lounging every evening, please. Sleep.
Even though there's a weird philosophical bend to it all, there's something plain fun about just seeing this naive creature experiment with such simple activities and acknowledge how these function differently per individual. And then she suddenly mentions terms such as mass production like some anachronistic fracture of history. It's the kind of contrast that's sudden enough to be funny, but not so jarring that it's immersion breaking. It's a cute little fantasy world, just go with what you're seeing. So anyway, after Barb puts the bears to rest and creates more of herself thanks to the jelly pool, this weird, really freaking creepy sheep and zebra come in to take the jelly pool for themselves. Like I said, just go with it. And Barb manages to outwit them through both distraction and, of course, tickling them to sleep. With, I guess, a bit of drunkenness.
Oh, but where's the fun? What's happening?
Despite that turn, I find this whole arc really charming in just how low-key and unique it is. It retains enough of that character and atmosphere to still feel like Summer Camp Island.
Got him with the old point where it isn't. Newest trick in the book. Work like a charm, just like
rather than a total out-of-left-field diversion. And it fills a few holes about this weird mystical character that, while a bit on the hand-wavy side, are more entertaining to witness than one would originally think. And even though complimenting the show's backdrops frankly should go without saying at this point, I just have to mention how fantastic these in particular look. Sure, the purples and pinks may get tiring for some, but I personally dig how they look together, and even beyond that, man, just look at how packed with detail some of these are. It's insanely beautiful stuff. So yeah, pretty cute start to the season. It may not be that integral to the story at large, but it's always fun to get more world building, and you really can't go much further back in the timeline than this. Plus, if you did want more serious drama, the rest of the pack leaves no shortage of that. Yep, there's that drama I was just talking about. So now we flash back, or I guess flash forward given the last story, to when Ramona first left Susie for frozen time. Naturally, their distant friendship really takes a big toll on Susie's mental health, and as witches tend to do, she burps out her built-up emotions, manifesting it into a ghost. Specifically, the same ghost boy that Oscar and Hedgehog met all the way back in episode 8.
I'd rather tell you all my thoughts and feelings about Laws. Or our thoughts and feelings, am I right?
As you'd expect, she tries to get rid of him but is only able to do so upon reuniting with these ghost dads, and if that wasn't enough, we see this whole freaking society of ghosts populated entirely by Susie's burps through the years, some of which bring back certain repressed memories that clearly leave her uncomfortable.
Does everyone here know Susie?
Yes, son. Of course.
We were all created the same way you were. Graciously.
So much is implied about Susie in so little time thanks to this metaphor. Almost like these are things we are soon going to learn about her. But then we pivot to Betsy, being the last witch to come along, immortal alongside Alice, and not quite as much a natural at magic as her peers. She's feeling a sort of imposter syndrome among them. This becomes a problem when they do try to initiate her through a marginally rude activity that she's just too nice to follow through on.
You didn't do it! You definitely said hi to that fifth Yeti!
Only for them to get caught in an avalanche which everyone but Betsy is able to poof away from, leaving her lost and alone in the forest.
Dear Mom and Dad, I'm making friends. I'm part of the group. Everybody loves me.
Where she runs into, who else? The ghost boy. And a lot of the story from that point on is just seeing these two bounce off each other, and it feels so natural the way they hit it off too. Betsy's been overwhelmed by her new life and just needs someone to talk to who will listen, which the naive ghost is more than happy to do.
Honestly, not feeling super receptive to friendship as a topic right now.
Will you kindly list some topics?
You know, politics, literature, yesterday's weather, emotional repression, universal entropy, ooh, or pants.
I know pants.
He knows pants.
I love pants. I don't own any, but I've looked at them a bunch.
All the while they get to settle down and enjoy some of the simple things, from having fun in a pants store, which by the way is run by one of the show's writers.
I'm Jacques Pendarvis, and I've touched every pair of pants you see before you.
To Betsy just deciding to try being a ghost herself. And by the way, this form is way cuter than it has any right to be.
You just gotta flex your muscles. Yeah, that's it. You're gonna do great.
Honestly, as utterly simple as so much of what they get up to is, they're just so innocent together that you can't help but be charmed by it. Sadly though, it just wasn't meant to be, because just as they were about to confess their love for each other, a misunderstanding prompts Susie to wipe Ghost's memory, ending with the two being split up, leaving Susie with yet another regret on her plate. Oof.
Oh, hello. Who are you? Who am I? Am I supposed to meet somebody? I guess I would remember if it was important.
A fittingly dour note to end a tale with emotional baggage, showing the lasting impacts they can leave on both yourself and those around you, when it's okay to just let it all go, and when you must face it head on, when it can blossom into a friendship, and when it can break friendships. Typical Summer Camp Island, you come for the cute kids, but stay for the relatable trauma. However, this only holds way more true with... Ooh boy, I am so not ready to talk about Susie and Her Sister. Just to set the stage, my first time watching the series, Susie and Ramona came really dang close to making me cry, but this one actually did it for me. And that's because this little trilogy is, no exaggeration, a legit tragedy. Very little is played for laughs, and for the most part, you're just seeing these two young witch sisters get repeatedly put through the ringer. Heck, even the very beginning sets the mood by accompanying the visual of little ragamuffin Susie with this unusually sad piano music. So yeah, this is another flashback story of hers. This time going back to when she was 2 years old with her parents, specifically when her mother gave birth to a real prodigy, some may say rogue toddler, by the name of Mildred. Yep, we're finally pulling that pin. Not only does this intimidate Susie by outdoing her, but very quickly the nearby town gets scared by her out-of-control spells, most of which involve conjuring frogs. This gets so escalated that their parents must leave them with their great-great-great-grandma Agnes while they find a potion for Mildred in the frozen north.
I can't stand kids. No off to bed with you, you little snuts!
We then see the two sisters leave their crappy barn to venture into London, selling hot corn for a friendly housekeeper who took them in. This all happens in the first 11 minutes. That's how compact the story is. And yet, it's not to a fault. The emotional beats all still register well, and each plot shift is communicated quite effectively, with seamless transitions from one to the next. But getting back to the story, their seemingly peaceful living quarters come crumbling down upon the day of Susie's gibbous rite, basically a witch's maturity ritual, and so much shit goes down from here.
That's just what you get with old Mildred.
The parents get lost on their journey home in a very spine-chilling bit, leading Susie to foolishly take an immortality potion given to her from some bullies.
If it was always my 15th birthday, then I could just wait till Mum and Pop get back. Whenever that is. Adulthood's just a bunch of chores and small talk anyway, I presume.
Mildred, who still hasn't gotten the hang of her abilities, accidentally wrecks her sister's family heirlooms. She takes the potion herself and runs away to the forest where she talks to this little fart ghost.
Hey, when did you say Susie was coming? I don't have any plans, but I do have anxiety.
She convinces herself to make things right by traveling over to the frozen north herself. All the while, Susie is sent away to America before she ever has the chance to apologize. And to tug on her heartstrings even further, their trips were literally side by side with each other. God, they were so freaking close, and now they're further apart than ever before. This really is just a bunch of negative situations piling on top of each other, all centered around two witches who, like many sisters, struggle to get along even though they clearly mean well. Despite how jealous and annoyed Susie got at Mildred at a young age, she was clearly determined to look out for her in their parents' absence.
We're young?
Yeah!
We're strong?
Yeah! And we can do this with our thumbs!
And when Susie gets mocked by these bully witches, Mildred actively stands up for her, despite her misguided direction. And even with the massive fight that breaks out between them, the many mistakes they make, and all the pain left lingering by the end, they still have too much unconditional love for those negative feelings to last long. They may physically be further apart than ever before, but their emotional connection never goes away.
Will you send Mildred my way when you find her?
Oh, don't worry.
I'm just gonna say it, this may very well be one of the single most moving, beautiful, and impactful stories to ever come out of Cartoon Network Studios. And it's from the silly little Animal Camp cartoon. This is proof of what even the most cute and lighthearted of concepts can lead into when put into the right hands, and how sometimes art is much more than what it may seem at first glance. But let's not get too far ahead. We still have 2 more arcs to go through in this season alone. After 3 flashback stories, we're finally back to the present day, with a time travel plot that mostly takes place in 1794. It still halfway counts. This one starts with Oscar being left alone with Mortimer here, and the boy is introduced to the Monsters Memory Bottle collection, used to, in his words, audit the past. And it's here where he finds out that Mortimer was rejected to this prestigious secret society back when he was at Harvard.
Your face isn't as intense as your impressions, but your lack of expression is somehow even more heartbreaking.
So, being the short-sighted but still well-meaning kid he is, Oscar decides to use that bottle to take himself to Harvard in order to cheer Mortimer up. Also, he's wearing Where the Wild Things Are pajamas. From that point on, it honestly kinda has the most traditional structure of all these miniseries, like it actually seems to follow a somewhat standard 3-act structure. The first part has Oscar trying to blend into the monster classes and learning more about their historical customs. And to continue the trend of these miniseries all having connective tissue, Mildred also gets mentioned in this scene.
Well, slap my ears and call me Mildred.
By the end of that, Oscar reveals his motives to past Mortimer, which leads into the second part, where the monsters actually try to get their society formed, only to get refused by who else but Stuart, you know, that jerk, and the sneak mission develops from there.
Ava, be careful! I just need to get a better...
Oh.
It's okay! I can reach the book!
This gets resolved with them deciding that they don't need official verification to feel like a society. So that seems to close the book on the conflict. The problem is, Oscar can't remember how to go back.
Was I supposed to book a return ticket?
Which ends up being the focus of part 3. Which happens to also majorly involve this mage and coffee, and okay, maybe this isn't all that traditional, but stick with me here.
Modern coffee trash, it's got no heart. Emotions, where are they? In here. I've got coffee so good it'll bring a tear to your eye. Why? I'll tell you. But first, I need to clean!
Although this is probably the mini-series that contributes the least to the show's continuity, there are still some things really worth pointing out here. Mainly, this is one of Oscar's stronger starring roles for sure. All his defining traits are on full display here. His curiosity in exploring the memory bottles, his short-sightedness in traveling without considering any ramifications or even if he has the plan figured out, Hedgehog, his friendliness and honesty with everyone, and most importantly, his optimism. How he goes out of his way to bring his monster friends together and to make sure they're left happy in the end.
We'll have members, and rituals, and feelings. Hedgehog and I do this kind of stuff all the time.
Remember too, his glowworm identity established a couple seasons ago, and he's only made more lovable. How he's using his positivity spreading powers to create a lasting effect on his friends. To the point where, when it looks like all hope has lost for him returning, they throw him a cheer-up party, welcoming him to Harvard.
If I have to be stuck in the past, I'm glad it's with you guys.
Aww. It's also just cool to see how a period of history like this is covered. We don't really get that big a look at the world or anything, it's all quite contained, but seems like the glimpse we get of the history lecture proves inherently interesting because of the mere fact it's an 18th century class full of monsters.
Like George Washington himself, I will escort our fledgling nation of feelings to sturdier days.
It's not much, but it goes to show how well this show handles its world building. Overall, this one may be a little light in the grand scheme of things, but it's still a great Oscar story, a great monster story, a great flashback story, just an entertaining 33 minutes all around. Just don't be surprised if you've suddenly forgotten about coffee. And with the last three-parter of the bunch, we get not only the only one of these entirely taking place in present day, but also a very unexpected kind of focus. Remember this kid Oliver? What about this girl Alexa? And her sister Lem? I'm guessing not. At least I never paid any attention to them in either of my viewings, and they usually are relegated to background appearances anyway. Don't get me wrong, they serve a clear function in the show as part of the collective, but it's hard to say they added anything of note as characters. But now, they all finally get a chance to shine, each with their own segment no less, as Susie does what she can to help these campers discover their magical identities. This may sound kinda bland at first, especially with such tertiary characters, but the crew here really know how to flesh them out into people we want to see succeed in their efforts. It's not even like their personalities are really that strong, but they just naturally carry a positive presence because of what their roles here represent. Seeing peers discover their true selves, starting to feel left out, wanting to feel special, that's a place I think many of us have been to as kids, and the voice acting alone sells that feeling a lot more than you think.
Does everyone get something like this when they find out?
Depends on what kind of magical creature you are. Shark told me during a one-on-one therapy session.
The episodes themselves are not the best. In fact, the second one with Alexa is kinda stupid. She's sent to this annoying cloud puncher. Yeah, there's another character I didn't mention before. She appeared once in season 1 and then again in the Yeti Confetti arc, and didn't add anything for me in either instance. But anyway, a bunch of training montages ensue, only for Alexa to eventually find that she is a giant. To mice.
I am a giant to mice.
Oh! You are a giant!
How is that a magical identity? We're all giants to mice. Maybe that's the joke, and I get this is a weird fantasy world, but I don't know, that just feels like a cop-out to me. But the other two have their moments for sure, especially as far as Susie herself goes. But let's be real, that's to be expected. And I do actually like just the fact that these folks were actually able to get some time in the spotlight for a change. The most interesting is undoubtedly Lem. as we discover she actually wasn't supposed to go to camp and forged her invitation so she could go with her big sister.
This looks like a ransom note and smells like a belly button.
No one will know the difference.
So to avoid getting found out, she decides to go on the lam in frozen time. Of course, Ramona comes up and she gives the little girl some sage advice alongside some fuzzy time baby hijinks.
Quickly, time baby 1118. He can smell you. Close the window.
And I should mention for callback's sake, it's Lem's relationship to her sister that gets Susie to calm down in the end.
I just wanted to be near her. That's why I made a forged invitation.
Oh, this is a sister thing? Okay.
Apart from all that, there's not much more to say. It's pretty standard for what you expect from SCI by this late in the run. Some beautiful scenery, a bunch of nice character moments, Susie being the biggest mood ever. Yeah, it's far from the best note for a season like this to end on, but it works as a calm before the storm sort of miniseries, as there's only one more season left to go. Home stretch, folks. Let's see how it all ends. Season 5 released on December 9th, 2021, and 1 month later, Julia had confirmed that they were wrapping up the series for good, indicating one last season to release. And sure enough, as every season since the second had before, it was all set to premiere on good old HBO Max in June 2022. Though it was still quite niche all things considered, I and the others who were invested by this time couldn't wait to see how this unique fantasy story was going to end. Except we didn't. Literally 2 days before it was supposed to drop, it was inexplicably and with no reason given whatsoever, pushed back to 2023. After we had received inarguable evidence it was all ready to go, trailer and everything. And why was this?
I'm now your new CEO. Hostile takeover, baby.
But okay, I thought. As annoying and egregious as this shakeup was, I suppose things are going to sort itself out in time. Or perhaps not, as just a couple months later came a day that will go down in infamy. The sudden call to pull a huge stream of programs from the service, including Summer Camp Island.
Fuck it!
This suddenly put into question if the final season will even see the light of day at all, which naturally made Julia Pott quite furious, as this viral tweet couldn't have made any more clear. Actually, I don't think that fully sums up how she was feeling. Check out this poem she wrote around the same time.
Tea kettle. I have half a hoof in this day, and I'm staring at the tea kettle, who is screaming louder than I have ever screamed, and it's only Tuesday. She's angry. I'm angry too. You've come over for tea in the middle of a Tuesday, and I don't scream, because I do not want to be left with 2 cups of tea. You brought flowers, so we have something to look at while we discuss all the ways that we've disappointed each other, and I hold the tea in my sweaty palm and watch you drink. It's delicious, you say. It's poisoned, I say. The flowers are poisoned too, you say, from the floor. I'm on the floor too, and the kettle won't stop screaming, and no one's left.
Yeah, I don't think I even need to detail how dark a time this was. But if you are not in the know, let's just say this was the moment the streaming bubble had officially burst. And as of when I'm writing this video, the entire world of Western animation has yet to recover in really any regard. Thankfully, with this show specifically, there was soon a silver lining. In a press report, Cartoon Network says that SCI will be airing its final season on the network itself, which I think the reaction here says it best. Regardless, it was certainly annoying to have to wait such a long time, but it was something. In fact, the season did air in several international markets during the wait period. Another thing of note that took place during this time was a crossover episode with Wee Baby Bears, where they accidentally summoned Betsy, Alice, and Susie through a book spell. It's fine. We got a lot of cute and freaky visuals out of it, and it's always fun to hear Julia do her thing with Susie.
Get back! Ah! These things probably have rabies, or worse, double rabies.
Should we do that one?
Yes.
But like a lot of that series, you're not going to get something all that substantial here. That said, it at least kept the series a tiny bit in the public eye in the meantime.
Maybe we'll come visit sometime.
Sure.
The show would then re-air on Cartoon Network US throughout the summer of 23, airing all the episodes previously exclusive to Max for the first time on linear TV, before finally getting to the long-awaited 6th and final season on July 31st and dispersing it across the next 2 weeks. And let me tell ya, it felt so incredibly satisfying to finally have more of this show again. And though you wouldn't know it from how it begins, I was in for something that had to be seen to be believed. Season 6 is the ultimate culmination of everything that has been set up in the previous 5. And I mean everything. So many characters and settings are brought back in major ways, our familiar faces all get their deserved closure, each and every episode builds on top of each other, and above all else, the storytelling reaches its true apex of character writing, drama, and creativity.
Wait, I know what that sound is. It's the hideous buzzing of my tattletale heart.
I suppose the best place to start with in all this would be the themes, because everything that goes down in these 20 adventures centers on a few specific messages: facing your past mistakes instead of running from them, knowing your place in supporting the cause, keeping friendship in sync with time, and leaving old traditions behind for a new beginning. Cause things certainly happen all throughout. Put simply, we have Susie needing to one by one find closure on their broken relationships, while Hedgehog and Oscar, having learned about the two best friends prophecy, each go through a bunch of trials as they try to bring magic back to the world. And also there's a big tornado approaching the island that relates to all this, please trust me.
Bureaucracy.
But the way all these events go down, that's not really the central priority. Instead, it's to make all the events tie some way into one or more of those aforementioned messages. Everything that happens to the characters is in service to the story, which is itself in service to the themes of the season, and by extension, the whole show. There's a certain consistency to how the episodes are formatted too, with just about a perfect structure to match. With these episodes all being labeled as chapters, combined with the uniform look of the title cards, this is, more than any other portion of the show, which as you know by now is saying a lot, essentially a classic children's storybook brought to life. Think something like Alice in Wonderland.
I dare say you've never even spoken a word at a time.
Some chapters, particularly the first few, may at first seem rather segmented and, while not quite fillery, a bit of a break from the more dramatic and action-packed portions. But where they shine is what they contribute in regard to the themes and, more importantly, the character journeys. Often someone will pick up some kind of message or virtue in one chapter that'll end up becoming key in a later one. And with the story as a whole revolving around a bunch of personal journeys, it feels like no matter how many different conflicts come up, they're all tied together by the way everyone grows and realizes their best selves through these trials. The show has never been any stranger to character growth, but the way it's done here always feels more systematic and purposeful.
Instead of 100% guarantee, I like to say stuff like, we'll see what we can do.
It lacks the charm of my usual leap before you look style, but that's how you want to play it.
On top of that, despite each installment merely being part of the whole, they still carry a distinct identity from one another, often involving a specific character, setting, or event that's contained to that, and with each having their own beginnings, middles, and ends, no matter how conventional they actually are. But of course, another key thing that makes the execution of the story stand out is the presentation, especially visually.
Well, the ferns are alive.
Yeah, but that performance was dead.
Okay, you are awful.
Okay, so I must have complimented the visual majesty of the series like at least once per season, but man, it bears repeating yet again here. Because just when you thought there's no way it can continue to impress, you've got backgrounds that are packed to the brim with life and detail. Every new setting you see is instantly well defined, and they're all shot in such a dynamic, memorable way that only further brings them to life. And that's only further emphasized by how we get too many new settings to possibly count. We get stuff like a clock shop, a monastery walkway, a mysterious castle in the clouds, an abandoned lighthouse, the inside of a tourist snow globe. You really do never know what exactly you're going to see next. But even the more familiar stuff on the island and other returning environments look even better than they ever have before. Part of this is because of the scene direction, but you can tell in general that the artists were able to just go much more to town in their work. Like, there's a sense from everyone in the creative team that this was gonna be their big magnum opus, and they need to bring the show out on as high a note as possible. And then you get the sequences that decide to not just get all stylistic, but really go hard on them. Some on screen much longer than others, but all leaving an impact. From the ominous but glowy liminal space inside the metaphysical reserve, the abstract dream world Hedgehog's in here. This montage of Susie literally exploring the world in search of Mildred alongside all these old-fashioned pastel-looking landscapes, complete with dot texturing. But my personal favorite is this crayon-looking sequence. Look at the way the strokes alternate between frames. It looks like you could just peel the paper off the screen. Not only is this an admirable amount of experimentation in a project already packed with artistic detail, but they only further make it feel like the storybook this show is deep down.
You're just like your grandma with your magical thinking.
But speaking of events, what exactly does go down to wrap up this whole saga, you may ask? Well, with how character-focused I said it all is, I'm going to break it all up by character arc, just to really sell you on how layered and engaging each of them are in their own way.
Is this really just my life? You mushrooms don't talk? Not even a pea?
I've previously described Hedgehog as a true active thinker, the real brains of the campgrounds. And while the science lover angle we saw before does somewhat disappointingly take a backseat, yeah, she very much proves her smarts in everything she does. Chapter 2 is unquestionably a standout here, where she wakes up to find herself back home in Massachusetts, never even being sent to camp.
When did I leave the island?
Island? Oh, you had a fever dream. I'll get you some water.
And with her mother being the uptight figure she is, Hedgehog keeps being denied any of what she saw was real and that she only has a dull life in business to look forward to. All the while, she keeps running into familiar characters in her attempts to prove herself right and magic her way back onto the island.
Hey, what are you two sisters? Premium guests, right? For a couple of beautiful ladies such as yourselves.
This entry isn't just entertaining and finally getting a more full look at the mundane, modern world our campers have come from, but how it finally gives Hedgehog a chance to really stand up in the name of both the dreams and for the survival of the lost form she's gotten a taste of.
If magic doesn't exist, I'll bring it into the world myself. I'll take this $800 and move to New York City. I know the rituals, I know the spells. Probably have no friends and have to eat baked beans for a little while, but I'll get a coven together eventually.
And it's through adamantly declaring to bring magic to the world that she is able to find her escape and is therefore rewarded by Susie with her wand. Would have personally liked it to have more build-up across the past 4 seasons, but it still feels earned, and with all we know about the lore, it makes perfect sense for this to be the final trial in that course. And as the season goes on, she's put through more pressure the more responsibility she's given as an official part of the coven. She's scared of shocking the hags upon having to rescue them from a snow globe they think is the real Pittsburgh. When she's left on her own when all the other witches use their awakening energy to keep the dimensional portal Susie's in open, she struggles to think of where to go from here to keep Susie's body from fossiling over, clearly being scared out of her mind to let everyone down. And it's only with the support of the rest of the babies is she able to come up with a clever plan. And when magic disappears from the island altogether and Susie is...
I'm going to tell him nothing because he isn't coming back!
Yeah, we'll get to what she's up to later. She takes it upon herself to track down the power controls somewhere in the island to turn it back on. In all this, Hedgehog proves herself to be not only worthy of being deemed a full witch, she proves herself a strong proponent in reigning in a brand new generation of magic. She's the young one in the coven, the one who never gave up on following her dreams even in the face of both physical and mental adversity. She's not without emotional weakness, particularly when it comes to her imposter syndrome, but with the right motivation, she'll do what it takes. If anyone can help welcome magic back into the world, it'd be someone like her. great role model all around.
Nothing finer than the moments of anticipation between a knock and your best friend opening the door.
I love Oscar. He's come so freaking far. To be clear, he's still his introverted, sensitive, and occasionally hasty self as before, but there is one important thing that especially separates his portrayal in Season 6 compared to Season 1. He knows exactly where his lane is on the road. His #1 goal is to put a smile on everyone's faces, to brighten the mood when those around him are at their lowest, to live true to his glowworm identity of transmitting magic where there is none. In fact, his character flaw in the first couple starring roles here isn't necessarily him being clumsy. If anything, he gets too focused on spreading joy for common sense to really kick in. But that just gives him layers, some room for improvement that works well off the flaws established about him before. 3 consecutive episodes are about this. The first has him getting upset that the Alien King and Barb aren't complimenting his decorative touches, despite it very clearly not being the right place or time for that.
I'd pay $50.
You shouldn't have to. There are rush tickets, lotteries, and the like. Theater should be accessible to all incomes.
We later see him try to contain his overwhelming emotions so he could help these clown aliens reenact these pre-written complaints, or GERs as they're called, and only when he starts to feel unhelpful to this cause does he just let it all out.
Is he hanging the painting again? That right there is the weight of the world. Whoa, whoa, whoa!
And then there's when he volunteers to stay captive with the Miracle Rabbit in order to save Ramona from being trapped there herself.
You're offering me your friendship voluntarily. I accept.
He's really not looking out for himself enough in all of these, and it makes for some significant thoughtful character building, especially with what comes later. But the payoff I especially want to highlight is this scene near the end, where Susie is at her weakest, and they are left alone in Shark's tank.
I don't think you're a coward, Susie. It's not cowardly to come to therapy. It's actually very brave to take this step.
She's embarrassed, she's diminished, she even tries to deny Oscar's advice. But he never judges. He puts on a humorous act that actually gets a slight chuckle out of her. He tries to play therapist, just giving her a space to pour out her feelings. And when it finally comes time to confront her baggage, he makes himself the bellhop, loyally standing by Susie as she enters the ring.
Bellhops are just there to help carry bags. They don't ask questions about the bags, they don't judge the bags, and they certainly don't judge the bag holders for having bags.
I think loyal really is the best word to describe Oscar, in fact. Even if he's not the most street smart, he is happy to lend an ear to whatever you have to say, and will, without question, give you the hug you need to relieve the weight on your shoulders. Shows how underappreciated people like him are in this world.
I don't want to be in any more unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people!
Mildred, yeah, needless to say, she's way more tragic than those two. Even more so than how she was in Season 5, if you can believe it. The first time we physically see her, she's freaking out over how many wrong steps they take in their journey to the frozen north, causing her to be public enemy #1 pretty much all over the world, paving the way for the infamous witch hunts of the time. Man. While I'm here, I really need to bring up this comment I got in the Season 5 video describing this parallel in detail. The fact they have this massive haunting connection to this dark time in human history as a key component of the show, and it's all subtext. It's just another thing that makes the way this show is laid out all the more thoughtful and mature. But anyway, after all that, finally arriving at her destination, she's slammed with the news that her parents are pretty much dead.
Well, they haven't been around for decades.
Oh, so I missed them.
Full of guilt for all her rogue magic has caused, she makes a shady deal with this fox thing which allows her to dispense her magic, intended to be given up for his consumption, but the fart ghost from before manages to convince Mill to instead keep it safe in a bunch of jars they find stored in this abandoned shack. I should mention too that just before this, she contemplates dumping it in the ocean, and the way it's shot makes it almost look
The world's got no use for my horrible magic. I won't ever hurt anyone again.
Fuck, man. However, she ends up losing her memory upon doing so. And what's interesting is that you are led to think it's like a side effect. It certainly seems that way at first.
I feel like a tube of toothpaste. Or like a tube of toothpaste even.
Wait.
It's as if I were a tube of toothpaste.
Oh no.
But a later chapter then states otherwise, as what makes it come flooding back to Mill is her literally sliding into the ghost of herself, making her experience the pain all over again. And she even starts to deny that what she saw was her at all. And upon finally accepting and coming to grips with reality, her friend Ghost says this.
I don't think you ever lost them. I think you just went through some big stuff and they got blocked.
So while never outright confirmed, it suggested that it was instead emotional repression. That she would rather spend the rest of her life as a lowly jar god in the freaking Arctic than to even so much as socially interact with anyone, even repressing away the friends she literally farted in existence. The memories of ruining Susie's gibbous right, being chased down by every destination in the world she's been, and making her parents leave her and Susie's life to their deathbeds, has traumatized her too much to ever so much as think about it. It's only when she has to literally face those memories head on that she realizes that her sister needs her. And even with her continuing to be without magic, she needs to be the one to convince Susie to escape from the false life she has subconsciously formed. But I'll detail these later events a little further down. And of course, a bunch of other characters get some final hurrahs in as well, some admittedly more significant than others. The alien planet gets one last story where Oscar participates in the Jester Clown's Grr show for the king, who happens to carry with him a Grr of my own. Peeking mics.
Whose girls do you think those are? They're all mine. I'm the one who can't hang my own pictures.
The PB&J monks from that one episode where Oscar coughed up his voice also came back and paved the way for one of Oscar's more pivotal discoveries. Barb becomes a more proactive character when the Rascals, these creepy prehistoric animals, begin to finally awake.
And that comfortable couch you're sitting on right now? It's 2 bears.
Even Pajamas and Jim Jams get a story together where they're tasked to track down the Time God, and the presser quickly builds on Jim Jams before he finally admits to his cloth companion where he actually came from. Yeah, he has a backstory too, and you're never gonna guess what it is either. He was a dream watcher who decided to mess with everyone's sleep schedules and got swiftly punished for it.
Time emptied Knight's pockets and used Knight's pocket lint to transform me into a lowly pair of pajamas.
What's lowly?
Oh, purple.
Yep, Susie's husband all this time was a humiliated god. Imagine that. Admittedly, with how expansive the cast is, there are some, like the monsters, that end up not having very much to contribute.
Uh-oh. We saw a group hug, and we couldn't resist.
And some others whose plot threads get one scene's worth of closure.
What's the matter, Betsy? Did you see a ghost?
Worse, I think I saw my ex.
What the heck? But even then, the writers do make a point to devote an episode to each magical group contributing a key role in the plan to rescue Susie, which is where the babies really get to shine.
Get warned by someone else? Is this gonna feel weird? Oh, it feels nice actually.
In general, it's pretty neat just seeing the campers we've gotten to know across the show bond a further kinship with their respective groups. All except Lem. Poor Lem.
I'm Lem. I'm just a baby.
And because of their shared camp experiences, they become a sort of bridge of communication between all the different creatures over the island. It's not that much in terms of the overall story, but it's another nice benefit to us being at this point, where everyone has realized their identities. And much like Hedgehog's witchhood, it serves as a hopeful example of this new era of magic. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention, when it seems like things are starting to wind down, Oscar approaches Susie with some concerning news.
My parents are here.
In actuality, there's not much to them, but their presence really makes the looming sense of finality start to really hit the viewer.
Is camp over?
We all knew in the back of our heads the kids had to go back home sometime, but so much has been happening all at once that the passage of time has been all but forgotten, which the show only further emphasizes here.
In regular world time, 1 week. But on the island, you've lived 129 days.
So today is July 56th?
We get a couple antics where they try to hide the world's magic from these two, but it's surprisingly downplayed to just this one episode, as it gets wrapped in a pretty dang humorous way.
Okay, go. Got it. She hit it a country mile.
Go, Susie! Good at baseball! You do the baseball!
Wow, that is not how I remember it at all.
And their role from that point on is to provide some comfort to the babies when they're all trapped in the library, and even some words of wisdom to Susie. Speaking of, I have saved the biggest of these for last.
I never really thought about life past 15. Being away from Mum and Dad. To be away from you.
Susie McAllister. This cranky, 415-year-old English anthro cat is given so much exploration of her inner trauma, I'm surprised the Infinity Train didn't pick her up. We've already seen her display plenty of weakness in the present day, like her being all alone on her annual 15th birthday, and feeling betrayed by Ramona at the start of camp. But all the rest of her feelings have bubbled up inside her for all these years, and it starts to arise in the very first chapter of the saga. Literally getting pulled by her legs into the old cabin where Ramona resides in frozen time.
I haven't been here in so long. We used to bounce on this a lot.
She confides in her breakup and really thinks about the times they've spent together, finally putting the sting aside for good.
If anyone's the best friends that will save magic, it's them, not us. But that's okay to me now, because I know you are my magic. I love you, Ramona.
And she then promptly puts her long-standing dream of the two saving magic and the burden she felt as a result to rest. So literally that she has Pepper throw a funeral for it. And despite just how silly an idea that sounds, it is actually played incredibly straight. Yet it's all written and delivered with such an earnestness and poignancy that I still fully buy it.
You bury things that exist, but where do you put things that never came to be? In the night and in the clouds.
It's drawn out, but in a way where every emotion they're experiencing gets to settle its way into our brains. That, along with the clouds and sound mix conveying such a naturally comfy environment, you don't really mind spending this much time up here. Not to mention all the symbolism going on throughout the eulogy. After being declared free, danger starts to arise from a looming tornado that engraves itself on Susie's neck, which he takes as a signal from the heavens. She may think she's untied the biggest knot in her life, but there is in fact a greater one that goes way further back, and I'm sure you all can guess what that is by now. Mildred. So by retrieving the hags through a snow globe, yeah, I don't know what the heck they were doing there. She schemes to respond to the signal by traveling into this mystical dimensional bridge.
The metaphysical reserve.
Huh?
And in the metaphysical reserve, she finds herself back in her youth at the moors, back with Mildred and her parents. Except instead, she is the big prodigy of the family. And in this alternate reality, life seems to go really smoothly for her. Her Gibbous right goes without a hitch. She's officially declared the most powerful witch on the moors.
From this moment on, you are a full witch woman, part of the history of witchcraft, now and forever.
And when she prepares for her future, Mildred actively volunteers to be right by her side.
Yeah, I think that would make me feel a little more at home.
She never seems to understand that she is living in a mere simulation, but her memories haven't been wiped either. Every so often, she hears these bizarre voices coming from some higher plane of existence. And on top of that, whenever it looks like her parents are or about to have left her, she all of a sudden turns downright shell-shocked, scared to death that they're gone from her life forever. which, recalling just how traumatizing the moment they got lost in the frozen north was, says so much about how much the slightest reminder of a blacked out memory like that can outright destroy even the calmest of souls.
It's my gibbous right. They promised they'd be here, but they're not. All because of you.
You're right.
This is not just a story of Susie trapping herself in a reality that could have been. It's a story where she finally gets to experience a sort of happiness she has always been denied. And from there, she leads a full, relaxed life, living her retirement painting a very familiar feeling landscape, having this nagging feeling that despite getting everything she ever wanted, she hasn't actually been true to herself this whole time.
I always felt there was something missing, as if the buccaneers of fate overtook my armada somewhere years ago. I was also quite complicated. Maybe too complicated. But we all know one simply cannot go back and rewrite one's life.
There's that repression again, so determined to live a comfortable life only to find that you can't run away from your past scars, and that sometimes the only solution is to go back to your roots in order to return to reality.
Mildred, hold on! Mildred! No, I've lost you again.
A bit over the top, sure, but visualized beautifully all the same. However, the cracks only show more than before. Her abandonment complex causes her to, in a panic, expose the island's magic to the Peltzers.
Honey, did you see that? Oh no.
Which then prompts her to give it a hard shutdown, only to soon discover it won't turn back on.
Magic is gone. It's really gone.
There's even an entire episode following that where the core premise is Susie can't take her boots off. And even that has enough layering and subtext that you forget so much of the episode is just sitting around a single location.
I can't even get my own boots off. I couldn't save magic. I separated Betsy and Ghost. I hurt Mildred. It's all my fault.
Susie, it's okay.
Just goes to show how far some hard-hitting personal weight will take you. By now, all she cares about is making sure she doesn't endanger anyone else. So she leaves them all in a bunker, and after going to therapy with Oscar, they finally get swallowed by the big tornado where she is met with a lonely, mysterious record player. A record of her 15th birthday, her big explosion at Mildred, the moment in her life that she can never take back. And it is all directed with such an intimidating, booming precision.
Mildred, what are you doing? You're ruining all my things.
Jeez, I just wanted to help you get ready. I'll put it all back.
No, wait.
Whoops.
You!
Don't be mean to me, Susie, or I'll tell Mum and Pop when they get back.
They're not coming back. They might not ever come back because of you.
The booming echo, the sense of dread, the pauses, it all perfectly captures the pit in Susie's stomach right now. The pure pain of having to relive the biggest mistake of your life.
I put my anger and fear on Mildred, and I can never take it back.
You're not bad, Susie. You said something really hurtful to someone you love. You're just sorry.
I am.
With Susie finally getting her hug, she is now ready to truly mend things up with Mill.
I love you, Mildred.
I love you, Susie.
And with the storm in her heart finally dissipating, so does the one on the island, still left in a destroyed state, but with room for something new to be built. The sisters are even given a second chance of mortality when she is greeted by who else but Time himself.
When you became immortal, your metronome stopped. On that day, you asked me to leave you. But in that tornado, you stepped forward. Maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but you asked me to come back, to help you move again. Time is moving through you, Susie.
By the way, the scene where they actually do get the time in their metronomes back is another that feels insanely well directed, really tapping into the mysticism and whimsy that we've all come to love.
That's it! Look! Now I want you to give it One last push. That's it. You did it. Now you're ticking.
With that, she, alongside Oscar and Hedgehog, discover that instead of restoring the magic that existed in the world centuries past, they should instead give magic itself a second chance by combining their bond of friendship with a new vessel, Oscar's peanut butter and honey sandwich, both a symbol of changing traditions and the perfect combination of the sweetness of friendship and the salt of time.
It has to be perfect, right? I don't think it has to be perfect. Anything can be acceptable.
With this salty butter of peanuts and sweet honey of bee, we welcome magic back into our lives, in whatever form it may choose.
My gosh, hi!
Oh my gosh, hi!
So while it didn't quite end the way Susie dreamed, she is perfectly content with getting to sit back and patiently await what the future holds. I am aware this wound up devolving into just summing up the events of the last few episodes, but that just goes to show how much Susie's wounds were, and have always been, the endgame. While a bit overly obvious and hand-wavy in places, this is the kind of full character arc that animation is made to tell. It fully connects to her attitudes from the very beginning of the show at that, from cold, selfish control freak to a vulnerable, self-hating victim of circumstance. Susie really is a character like no other in Cartoon Network's lineage. She is, like her voice actress Julia Potts herself, the real magic of Summer Camp Island.
Well, I couldn't let you get too far ahead.
We've all seen our share of 2010s cartoons that start out as lighthearted fun, only to gradually ease themselves into something much more dramatic over time. But Summer Camp Island has one of the most intriguing and methodical evolutions I've seen among them all. It almost kinda tricks you with how charming and innocent it starts off, with a lot of the magic elements being played as little more than the means to push stories or humor. And it was extremely successful at that. Like I said, the first time I watched through Season 1, I was always actively excited to see what the next one had in store. But not only were all the characters charming and the ambiance comforting, even early on, it littered in a few deeper stories and continuity threads to further elevate the experience, giving both the kids and adults a lot to think about after the credits roll, while still working perfectly as standalone stories. But the more you progress, the more these overtones ease into the front, subtly at first, only to open the floodgates come Season 3, and even more so with Season 5. And none of it feels jarring or forced. It doesn't feel like it's dragging itself out or in any way held back by executive mandates. It feels like we're finding out the secret lore of the island alongside the babies themselves, and there's a perfect reason within the show's history for it to be kept secret. Unlike Gravity Falls or the Owl House, the mystery is so baked into the core premise that you go into it not even thinking it's a mystery, despite the clues being waved right in the audience's faces. And the eventual serialization feels less like the real substance of the show, but more like a reward for the viewers who stuck around and actively became curious over any clues they might have picked up on before. It's a show that revels in how it feels like a mythical legend, told in a way that treats kids with intelligence, and knows exactly what to leave ambiguous, when to live in its own weird logic, and when it's time to lay on the rawness and depth. Summer Camp Island is a character-focused tale all about growing up, the turbulence of friendship, exploring your emotions, and discovering your place in the world. All this told through a colorful, imaginative, layered, wholesome allegory beautifully brought to life. This, in my opinion, is the type of story animation is all about delivering. And while the competition is just way too stiff to be the best or even my favorite of the lineup, I do consider this the single most underrated Cartoon Network series of the 2010s. Like I said at the beginning, it's hard to blame people that much when the show launched in such an unconventional way, didn't stick around on TV long enough for people to notice, and then released the vast majority of the episodes on the platform where it was inevitably going to get lost in the shuffle. It says a lot that its removal from the service was when it was most relevant in the zeitgeist. That said though, it's times like this when we should sit back and embrace what shows like this are all about. And I think all the emotion, artistry, and nuance packed into these 6 seasons deserves more admiration out there. It may not be the most thought-provoking, challenging, or flawless series out there, but damn if it didn't do so much so right. And the fact I devoted a full half year to my still new content creation hobby on this one thing definitely speaks as to how special it was to me. Maybe it'll leave a similar impact on you too. When I made the decision to do this retrospective, it was mainly just out of a desire to get more people watching this magical hidden gem, show people what they've been missing out on. After all, I've loved the series since the moment I first turned it on during COVID, and it always upset me to see it get swept under the rug all the time whenever modern Cartoon Network is discussed. But as I was progressing through the project, it slowly became about way more than that. So much has changed in the entertainment landscape in the past year alone, especially as far as animation's concerned. I already talked a little bit about the streaming bubble burst, and I'm not going to go in much more detail here, but it has led to multiple unions picketing on the streets at once, some massive consolidation and leash tightening all across the board, and a greater public awareness of behind-the-scenes turmoil than was ever possible before. To me, Summer Camp Island, in particular the time periods it was released in, feels symbolic to these in more ways than one. If the early 10s was an age of innovation, the late 10s was an age of unadulterated creativity. It was a, for lack of a better term, magical period where the sky was practically the limit, when someone who made a bunch of weird independent films could genuinely make it as a creator at a big Hollywood studio, and when a series like this was allowed the longevity to really tell the story it wanted. SCI really represents the exact kind of cartoon that only could have come to life in this time period, and while I'm really happy it did, seeing the end of it all finally make it here really made it set into me how much we've truly hit an end of an era, with only a few small traces remaining that are soon to leave themselves. As delayed as the final season's release was, it feels bizarrely fitting for it to come at the twilight of not only this big creative explosion, but also Cartoon Network Studios as we know it, whose facilities sadly closed down during this retrospective's making. But on a more optimistic note, there's also the themes that are baked into the show's ending itself. It's not a far reach to see the parallel between the magic fading at the dawn of industrialism to the danger looming over artists with ever-evolving technology, and how, only with the gathering of some truly magical souls and a whole lot of self-discovery and self-growth, are they able to kick off a new beginning. And indeed, we've lately been seeing some great examples of this in the world of animation, especially on the indie end, and several more promising projects to come, provided they get the right support, of course. It may not be quite the same as it was in the past, and it's unclear what the future will hold, but as long as there's a little magic in the world, there's always room for it to spread and grow into something special.
And here we go.
Do 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 do. The sweetness of friendship and the salty of time, the balance we need for magic to shine. Let's leave all our pickles in the pickled past. Let's keep our hearts floating and love will last. Peanut butter and honey, it's nourishing and it's yummy. The salty sweet with toast and tea, the snack of dreams. With help from monks and bees, we solved our mysteries, and we found a way.
I'm about to spend the summer with Hedgehog, and she's the coolest person in the world. I think you're the coolest too.
Let's sail away from the storms of yesterday to the future worlds of magic that together we'll create. Come walk with me, we'll watch the rainbows rise. Like all good things, friendship takes time.
It's not what we imagined, but close enough.
Thank you, everyone who supported me throughout this whole retrospective. I can't believe I actually managed to see this through, but hopefully this has given you the motivation to think more about a show you may have previously overlooked. Thanks for watching, please subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.